They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis.
Welcome everyone to this episode of Motherhood Metamorphosis. I'm your host, Brittany Ming, and today we're talking to Lauren. As a trained educator with 20 plus years of public speaking experience, Lauren makes evidence-based sexuality education fun and accessible. Lauren specializes in working with clients to restore positive and respectful approaches to sexuality, pleasure, and relationships, as well as overcoming obstacles associated with religious trauma, sexual communication, life transitions, emotional shifts, and childbirth experiences. Welcome, Lauren. I'm so happy to have you on today.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm so happy to be here.
So we met in college, but then we worked together later at your organization, the Motherhood Collective, where you were the founder and CEO for 10 years. So with that in mind, I would love to hear about what your experience working with so many women over a decade has shown you about what women go through with their sexuality as they transition from being a woman to a mom.
Yeah, Brittany, my work with women from preconception to postpartum was truly my introduction into the lack of knowledge and education surrounding sexuality. I remember that I had individuals come up to me at different points in my career, not even understanding how they had gotten pregnant, wanting to prevent a subsequent pregnancy immediately after the one that they had just encountered. For instance, some were going through postpartum depression and were afraid of becoming pregnant again soon, but didn't physically know how they had conceived, i.e. they weren't sure about ovulation. They didn't know what would result in pregnancy, how semen even came into their uterus, how babies were even made. And I, at those points, just thought, well, maybe this is just the very small subset of the world. As Brittany knows, where I am located in Virginia is in the middle of a Bible Belt, and has a lot of repression surrounding sexuality, especially with people in female bodies. So that was those little red lights would go off, and then we wanted to have a sexuality panel. And Brittany knows, but many of the listeners might not, that the Motherhood Collective was kind of founded on this idea that if you provide people with different educational opportunities, they will make the best decisions for themselves. And so it was always my heart's desire to put in front of the women who came to our free programming lots of different opinions. And so when people came to us constantly asking to talk about sex after baby, I tried to find experts in the field of sexuality in our area of Virginia, and always came up against a wall. We have one incredible sex therapist in town, who is licensed with ASACT, who practices from a faith-based perspective, totally fine, but not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And then we have one sex therapist who is also a psychotherapist and does a ton of psych evals and is packed, jam full. You cannot get in to see her. So we have those two opportunities for sexuality education and therapy in our small community. I could hardly ever get them. So I was left usually talking with doulas and midwives who know the body and who give excellent education, but it's not their specialty. It's not what they went to school for. They will happily provide the information, but it's not their focus. And so just year after year after year, I thought, like, this is crazy, right? Like, sure, there's licensed marriage and family therapists, but again, that's niching. That's saying you have to be in this type of a relationship to enjoy a sexually satisfying existence. And that just wasn't the narrative of every single woman who came to programming. You know that, like, that was just, it's not how it went. So all of these little things just kept going off in my head, but it was definitely my experience, to go back to your question, that we are ignorant if we believe that people in childbearing year are having sexually satisfying experiences in their lives simply because they have conceived and birthed a child.
Mm.
We all know that you need sexual activity of some kind or an insemination of some kind to have a baby. So I think we assume, oh, this person is sexually active and having a fine sexual existence. Goodbye. And we shut the door. And we can get into all of the other things that brought me to the place that I am, but I was shocked and very disheartened that so many people who had their legs spread for basically strangers couldn't drop the wall of shame to discuss it openly with other people in bodies that looked just like theirs.
Mm. This is a topic that I wanted to talk about from the moment I was brainstorming about topics for this podcast, because it is something that people don't know how to talk about, or they don't have the narrative to say, oh, wow, that isn't normal, or my experience could be better, or I didn't even know other people had that same experience as me. And I just wanted to have a conversation with somebody who is passionate about this, because sex is part of why we are mothers. I mean, other people have different routes. We know we've talked to other moms on here who've gone different routes to conceive their children, but traditionally, people are in a sexual relationship to bring their children into the world. But we have this bifurcation a lot of times in our lives. We're saying, oh, here I am as my sexual self, here I am in my motherhood self. And what is the integration in our lives between saying, this is who I was and this is who I am? And sometimes it's so hard to bring those people together in an integrated way. A theme in this podcast is talking about the goop and the transition we go to, the often dissolving of ourselves and the recreation into who we are, with motherhood as that catalyst. And so I think that sex can be a really important part of that conversation, but one that we are often afraid to talk about. So I wanted to hear from you, from all the women you've spoken to, about some of the common challenges. And we touched a little bit on them as far as education goes. But what are some of the common challenges that women have with their sexuality after children?
So, I want to hit on that and also kind of just piggyback on what you were just saying, because I think they integrate very well together. So within the world of sexuality, there's a narrative called the Madonna whore complex. And I would encourage any listeners to check into it, because I think they will have some little light bulbs go off. We are often in a heteronormative world conditioned that my husband wants a Madonna. He wants a pure, homemakery, childbearing, nurturing, loving, comforting, maternalistic partner. Whether we try as you might, I mean, everybody's trying to blow them up in most places, but that is still a narrative that weaves through some part of so many women's, and by that I mean born female and still identifying as female people, even if they want to blow it apart. But then our culture screams at us, what heteronormative men want is the whore. They want this sexy temptress who's a lady of the night and who can stumble into the room in her lingerie and tempt their husband. And yet never was anyone given education on how to integrate the two, or that they didn't have to be one or the other, that they could be both.
Like, I don't want to be the whore or the Madonna. Like, I just want to be myself. Yeah. You know what? I actually had that in my head, because that was something we talked about when I was in college, because that comes up in literature all the time, this Madonna and whore. And I'm like, how can I bring that up? Because we're not talking about literature. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
No, we address it often, and it's actually a part of, so for listeners interested in exploring sexuality education, additionally, I provide individual sexuality education, and it's one of the things I often do narrative exercises with my students on, of, who did you think you would need to be as a wife, right? And they'll list all these things, and they're basically describing a Madonna. You could put her in a painting, right? You could throw her in especially, and this is what gets back to your question regarding children. I think this switch goes over in our heads that motherhood is sacred. And so never would anyone fault you for spending excess amount of time with your children, right? No one's like, oh, she spends too much time with her kids, or, oh, she rocked her child to sleep last night, or, oh, she read Johnny another book, or no one's like faulting that. So we gravitate towards the things that are applauded in our culture, which is, oh, she's such a good mom. Oh, she's such a good mom. That's so beautiful. And then, but we leave behind, because we cannot integrate in our minds this woman of the night being a mother to children. And so even if it was there in some of our earlier relationship, even if partners had a hot, intimate life prior to children, when we put on this Mary, the mother of Jesus narrative, all of a sudden onto our beings who didn't even have sex, right, to conceive this child. So like, whoa, that's not even in this narrative. We become so far removed from our innate sexuality that I think what I see, the primary thing I see, is women not even having, feeling so uncomfortable, even identifying with the whore anymore, with their playful, sex-loving self, because in their minds, it rubs, it's oil and water to motherhood.
Right. Even with the word whore, people are like, oh no,
Right.
no,
I know.
I'm not that person.
Right.
Even
That's
if
why I like to say it
like,
a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So we see it as like, oh, that isn't who I am anymore. Or even if I want to be that person, like my body is different. I don't feel sexy, or I don't feel aroused, or I don't want, I'm so tired at the end of the day or on the weekends or whenever that I just don't feel like myself, like who I was. And I think a lot of women think like, oh, this is who I am now. Like, this is who I am. And even if they miss that part of themselves, they think this must be who I am. And there's a sadness there, but I don't think we have to stay there. So let's talk about moving forward.
Well, and I wanted to piggyback on that as well. I think many folks see sex as another thing they have to give. We've been conditioned, right, especially again, heteronormatively, that women, men take sex from women, rape culture, all these types of things. And so, I do a lot of work with clients on undoing that sexuality is for them as well. Orgasm is for them. Pleasure is for them. Sexually satisfying experiences can be for them. There doesn't need to be a partner included, right? This is regaining sexuality doesn't mean at first or immediately penetrative sex with a partner. Not at all. Not at all. So I would at some point love to unpack that more too, that I think, right, we say like, well, at the end of the day, I don't have anything left. And it's like, oh, that implies that you were going to be giving something. That implies that this was not a receiving, something that your partner is giving to you or something that you're giving to yourself. And I think that's a really interesting narrative to unpack as well. Like, whoa, this should be for you too, or you only. And how can we get inside the head there too?
Oh, that's so important. I think that can also be so life-giving in relationships when couples can communicate in that way of saying it's not just something that I have to give. It's not something that's taking from me, because your children take all day long. And then if we think like, oh, my partner is taking from me too, it just feels exhausting. But I think if we can reframe that as saying like, this is something that I can receive. This is something we give each other to give each other life and love and connection and intimacy, then that can be a life-giving part of the relationship and not something that takes away when motherhood already feels very exhausting. I mean, especially in those early years, especially after that first child, when the transition feels very dramatic in our lives.
No, and I think, in my mind, it's so interesting because I have lots of individuals approach me about the postpartum period and when can I have sex? And they want permission to deny sex a little longer is really what they're looking for most often. And it breaks my heart because we have just done, in my mind, the most sensual, powerful act in the world by bringing life into this world. Don't care how. It should be a time when women feel most in their bodies, most sensual, most grounded, most earthy, most useful and purposeful in the way that bodies should be, right? Not these Victoria's Secret models who've been airbrushed to the hilt, right? No, they are real purposeful sexual organs that actually produce life. And it's really, really amazing. And so, my heart breaks for the woman who is worried about having to give sex, when instead it could be just for her, right? It could be sex, could be back massages and hair tingles and head rubs and all of these luscious things that could be sex, right? Making out with your partner for your pleasure could be sex. And yeah, I would love to just keep unpacking that in any way we can, but just that the narrative is not, oh yeah, one more thing being taken from you, one more person needing something of your body, taking from your body, because that just reinforces years and years of gender role definitions that we can do away with now.
Right. And I think there's so many cultural narratives that we just absorb that we don't even realize that are part of our society. And we've talked about the Madonna whore idea that permeates, literature and movies and culture, and, what we saw from our parents and grandparents' relationships, or whatever it may be, or what we hear from our girlfriends, or this is my dating life, and this is my married life, and this is my motherhood life, and
Yeah.
how things are supposed to change. But I think that couples can decide what's good for them. But I think it can take time, and it's a transition. So I think transitions sometimes can feel scary because you're stepping into new territory. And when you have children and you're in that transition, you are in new territory. And that requires new kinds of vulnerability and new kinds of communication so that you can find each other again and find yourself, because your body has gone through this such a transformative process. So stepping into a new era of your sexuality is brave and vulnerable and scary.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, and I know we've used this at the Motherhood Collective, so you might remember this phrase, but that in certain cultures, if a vase breaks apart, we glue it back together with almost a gold glue, and that it's a more prized and precious vase than it ever was before. In my mind, relationships are always containers. They're just containers. This conversation is in a container, right? And it will end or it will break apart. And all relationships must do that. Now, some are meant to be glued back together and some are meant to just dissolve, right? We've all gone through friendship loss. We've all gone through different relationship loss. They're not meant to be glued back together, but I think partners can choose, right? You can sense it. We all can sense it. When things just need to break, the what was before needs to shatter away. Like we literally need to leave the house and go build a new one. But how we glue it back together can really, really be a beautiful process. And like you said, full of communication, full of challenges. I recommend asking for help. I think those are the bravest and boldest people. But we are foolish. We are foolish if we believe that we are the same people that we were prior to children or when we were dating. It's just not, it's not the truth. And I know that certain personalities are so afraid of change. But I can tell you the process of breaking something apart and putting it back together beautifully is much less painful than going through a divorce and separate, like breaking apart a relationship that you truly do value. And so I would encourage any person who is listening and in a new season, to shatter apart what was, because we have these great imaginations. We get to be the authors of these lives we live, to speak to Brittany's writing allegories again. Like we are in charge. We do not have to fit in the mold of what our best friend's marriage looks like with 3 kids. It doesn't need to. And I was also going to speak to that I think it's always bothered me that motherhood ends up being a bunch of war stories. We always try to one up each other on like how horrible our sex life is. And I would like it to end. I would like it to be like, well, I have a great sex life. I'm sick and tired of us trying to glorify this martyrdom experience of motherhood. Because most of the time it is us not telling our partners, hey, I need you to, if you want sex and I want sex too, I need you to come home at noon and I need you to take the kids and I'm going to go shower. I'm going to go get my nails done. I'm going to buy a new dress because I want to feel sexy. And then we can go to a great dinner. We have great sex. But that's what I need. And I really want to challenge us that we need to check in here. How much are we doing this almost to fit in with the women in our circles? I think women keep each other trapped so often because there's these trauma bonds of like, oh, we're all suffering together, so we'll stay in this yucky hurting together. No, no. You're worth more than that. You're worth more.
Yeah, for sure. We just moved to a new neighborhood, and we have 5 kids, and so all of our kids are running around, and our new neighbors came out and they were wondering. They asked, "Are you religious?" And we're like, "Well," and we're like, "We love Jesus, but not real. Like we're not religious." And they're like, "Oh, well, you have so many kids," and we're like. And I just
Rebel.
laughed because I'm like, well, we're not Catholic and we're not Mormon. We just and then later I told my husband that story and he's like, yeah, we're just horny. And so
Yeah, you should totally say that
I
from
should
now
have said
on.
that. He is more brave talking to strangers than I am. But then we joke all the time that we spent our entire marriage trying to prevent pregnancy, and we have 5 kids. So I think that that's a joke that we tell. Because we do have a lot of children and we're like, well, we don't fit into any of these other categories. And I liked what you said about telling our stories about our good sex lives. And I think back to my every baby I've had or twins and every postpartum and every time we've had to reestablish, because there is a time when you're not having sex, it's postpartum, the end of pregnancy
Mhm.
was not happening because you're large and in charge, and that wasn't my cup of tea. It may be other people's. So I think that there is a coming together again, and I think that every time it was like a fresh start to say, like, who are we now? What do we like? How has my body changed? How is your It wasn't necessarily we sat down and like had this pen and paper conversation, but I see that transition in our marriage where that was like, hey, we're coming together again and this is something new each time we had a baby. And that was something that we had to reestablish again as a couple. And for my marriage, I mean, we're being open on this is a podcast about sex, so we're going to be
Go
open
for
and
it.
intimate. But I think that my sex life has gotten better the more children that I've had. And I don't think that's a narrative that we hear very often. We often
No.
hear that every child you have, the more dried up your sex life becomes. And I think for me, what I had to realize is that my sex life doesn't have to look like anyone else's to be good. It doesn't have to be those articles you read of how many times is normal per month or per week or per day. I used to freak out about stuff like that and be like, is this normal? And through conversations we have, anything that is normal for you is what's right for your relationship. And anything that is good in your relationship is what's right for your relationship. So it doesn't have to be defined by any quizzes you take online or any articles you read or what your best friend's marriage looks like. Like it needs to be what's good for the two of you and what brings you close together and what brings you intimacy and closeness. So, and a lot of times that doesn't look like penetrative sex. It can be intimacy that works for you. And I think that can give women a lot of freedom if they're feeling tenuous about their body or pain or anything that is a hesitation after having their baby.
Yeah, I'm very thankful that you mentioned that it can be things other than penis and vagina sex, because I love using the phrase, what would be a sexually satisfying experience for you? Right? It doesn't need to be orgasm. It doesn't need to be fill in the blank. A sexually satisfying experience, again, for someone could be laying naked with their partner with no pressure for anything right then. Just having their new body, their new postpartum body that's like still this changing body for what, years, right? We all know that. There's like, just keeps changing. And just having it explored and told, I love this part of you. I love your new breasts. I love your new belly. I love your new butt, right? And having it just affirmed, that can be a freaking satisfying sexual experience. And talk about making partners hornier for each other, right? Then it just becomes more and more and more beautiful. I also, and we can talk about this now, Brittany, or later, but I want to talk about consent within committed relationships, because I think often women can have very traumatizing first sexual experiences back postpartum. Again, because they feel like it's taken, they feel like they have to give it. And yeah, I'd love to speak to that, but we can go a different direction if you would like to.
Yeah, I would love to hear about like consent
Okay.
within community relationships too, as I think that's really important.
So one of my favorite authors, I have her book here, I usually have like 6 books around me, is Dr. Betty Martin. And she made this incredible wheel of consent. And I encourage anyone to look it up, because for Brittany raising 2 teenage boys right now, about to go into high school, it's good. It is a good wheel of consent to discuss with anyone. And basically you start with a circle. And what I love to tell all my clients is anything outside of this circle of consent is wrongful behavior, is rape, is non-consensual, is things like war, is things, I mean, any taking without consent that one can think of in the world is what lives outside of this circle of consent. But then her theory is, in a communication or in sexual communication, someone is always doing, and then someone's always being done to. And then someone is always taking, and then someone is always giving. And it is just a beautiful way to look at sexual communication, and to have a quadrant, it's divided into 4 quadrants, where you are the taker. And I encourage all of my people in a female body who are integrating back into a sexual relationship with their partner post-baby to have a night or a week or a month where they are just the taker, where they are saying to their partner, would you like to give or receive right now? And their partner says, I'd like to give. And they say, okay, may I massage your shoulders? And the partner consents if they feel that that is a comfortable thing for them. And then woman in the female body gets the opportunity to explore her husband's shoulders again for the very first time, but she is the leader. It's not going to go any further than that. She doesn't have to worry that, oh no, I'm going to be rolled over in my back and penetrated. This is for me to remember what I love about this neck and this shoulders. And then maybe it's changed. Maybe his shoulders feel different from taking on fatherhood too. Maybe it's a whole different neck and shoulders. But having that power, being the person in the taking seat, can be revolutionary. You control what happens next. And then you can go back and forth. Then if your partner said if they would like to receive, right? Again, same thing though, you're in the driver's seat. You can say, may I stroke your arm? May I stroke your arm? Or may I stroke around your genitals? May I stroke around your cock? But this is for I am doing the action and you are receiving, I am watching, but nothing's going to go past that. And it can be this beautiful rebuilding of communication. And you might just find out something that your partner loves, or some way they love to be touched that you never knew before. So again, I encourage anyone to look up Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. And she even has a 3-minute game, which would be a highly, highly fun game to play with your partner. And you just ask questions back and forth. Where would you like to touch me? Where may I touch you? It's a really good way to decide who is leading the conversation and who is following. And for people who have gone through a birth experience, bringing this way back, Brittany knows that I have a very big passion for an educated birth. And I don't even like to say like a perfect birth, because it's not in our control. And so many women in this country specifically have such traumatic birth experiences where they were not in control at all, in an instance that had to do specifically with their genitals that now someone is asking to touch. So whether or not your provider wants to call it a traumatic birth doesn't matter. My daughter was born at home in the water. She still shot out of me so fast, I didn't have a chance to understand what was going on. And that was a traumatic experience for my precious vulva and my vagina. We had to come back to each other, and that's okay. And so I want women to give themselves a little more credit for the fact that we are birthing humans most often through the same place that then someone is asking to touch. And it is okay to say no. It is okay to say, yes, you may on this terms. Yes, you may like this. You may use your mouth only. You may use this soft, only touchy object that feels good. Or you may sit over there and watch me touch myself. And I will show you how I'd like to be touched. I think we just, again, this culture likes to define gender roles in certain ways, and we like to make it that the man comes home and takes his sex, and that's not how it needs to go.
Yeah. I like how your conversation just emphasizes communication, safety, and trust. And I think that's what we all want in our relationships. And I think that's the foundation of intimacy, which is ultimately the goal of any sexual experience we have is intimacy. We want that connection with our partner in a way that is whole and we're held in any way, shape, or form where our hearts and our bodies are treasured. And I think that after we have a baby, it can be that wonderful reset. It can be that way to say, hey, let's start something new. Let's communicate in a different way. Whether or not you had an amazing sex life before you had your baby, or it could have been better. I think that there's always room to say, let's grow together. I think that your sex life can be great after you have kids. It just may not look the same as before, and that's okay.
And also, as you were saying that, it made me think of, intimacy. I even saw a post the other day. It's so funny that you said that what we're looking for isn't really sex, it's intimacy. And that we just, right, Brene Brown is famous for saying we're all craving belonging. We truly are. And being sexually intimate with someone in a healthy, respectful, consensual way can truly feel like belonging, can truly feel like you are known. It can be great. It really can be great. And I was just thinking that, so often, so many mothers will say, oh, well, when I had kids, I realized that I wanted to feed my family better, work out for myself better because I wanted to be an example. Well, I would throw this in there too, because before long, young mothers of babies, you're going to have kiddos, Brittany, my ages, who are having natural sexual arousals, and their understanding of this world is going to expand rapidly so fast. So I really think the more we can integrate sexuality into our everyday, and be super honest with ourselves and educate ourselves in whatever means possible. And there's so many free resources. I want individuals to understand that I truly feel that sexual rights are human rights. And so there is a lot of free content out there. A ton. It is not hard. You do not need to book private sessions with Lauren to get your sex ed. No, it's all on the internet. It's all on Audible. It's all on YouTube. It's all great. But remember, very soon, these tiny little innocent babies that you have are going to be sexually active individuals too. And if it helps you to do it for them, then do it for them. Haha, do it for them. Maybe I should put that on shirts. Should be my thing. Do it for them. But yeah, yes, Brittany, that is what people are craving. And it's what our children will crave naturally too.
Yeah, we want to show them ways of being in the world and in their bodies that are integrated and not just about your body doing something, but it's also your heart and your soul and bringing yourself in a relationship with that partner. So,
well, and fun research fact, kids who know that their parents have an active sex life in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like, whether they've walked in on them, whether they know that there's a sock on the door and that's mom and daddy time, and you are explicit with them. They need to know that it is sexual intimacy. So that's the clincher. But kids who know that have sex later in life, have more consensual sex, have less unwanted pregnancies and less sexually transmitted infections, just by knowing that their parents have an active sex life, which is the coolest fact ever. It's like have
cool.
more sex
with
your
like
partner.
Those stats.
Yeah, it's just great, right? And have healthier sex. They're the ones who initiate it with a caring partner and have fulfilling first experiences. It's all great. It's all great statistics. So
that is great. Well, as we're wrapping up, as you are a sex therapist, and that is a wonderful resource to have, and I'm going to share all of your information at the end. Communication is key to having a healthy sexual relationship with our partner, but sometimes talking about sex can feel more intimate and scary than actually having sex sometimes. So could you offer maybe 1 or 2 conversation openers for couples to have dialogue about sexual desires or challenges that they're having?
Yeah. I'm going to correct one thing only because I'm legally required to. So I am a certified sexuality educator, not a therapist. And I just like to clear people. No, it's totally fine. Just, I so respect individuals and working within their scope. And it's just so beautiful that I get to work hand in hand with therapists, with pelvic floor therapists, with, OBGYNs, with midwives. And so I just like to make it very clear that I'm not trying to barge in and pretend to be somebody else. I love being just an educator. It's great. Yeah. So some of my favorite tricks are going onto the internet and searching for what is called a yes, no, maybe list. You need to prepare yourself because there's going to be some crazy things on these yes, no, maybe lists, and that's good. And I would suggest for a date night that you print out 2 copies and you maybe tell your partner or don't tell your partner, and make sure you're good, both in a good mental space, but make it far away from a sexual experience. So don't do this in the bedroom. Don't do this after a fight or before a fight. Do this in a very generic thing. You could be on a walk. It doesn't matter. You don't need to spend money. I always like to go back to this. Like, relationship doesn't mean spend money. It means communicate. That a date night or a date afternoon is a great time. And yeah, secretly fill out these yes, no, maybe, like individually fill out these yes, no, maybe lists of sexual things you would like to try. And then pass the list to your partner and read their list and they read your list. Then this is crucial. I want you to flip the list over to the blank side of the paper. And with that same pen, I want you to journal out how it made you feel. Because sometimes we can be very alarmed. It scares me that my partner would like to try butt plugs. He would like to try putting something in my anus. And that seems dirty. And I want you to write it all out. I want you to like do crosses. I want you to do all these things because your partner has just entrusted you with something. They have entrusted you with something very vulnerable to them. And you have entrusted stuff that is very vulnerable to your partner. And we're trying to get out of the Madonna whore complex. We're trying to have an open communication with our partner. So your feelings are great to be shared with your partner, but not right now. I want you to realize that underneath that tough exterior of your male partner is probably a nervous little boy right now, because they probably had just as poor sex ed as you did. So give it a moment, inhale, write down what scares you. Then pick a couple that sound really exciting to you. Pick a couple that you're like, oh, that sounds really nice. I hadn't really thought about that. And then focus on those with your partner. Then come back with a conversation. Ask them to do the same thing. Ask them to do the same thing. Any negative feelings that they have about any of the things you wrote down, even if it was no, we'll use butt plugs again as the same example. So if their partner wrote down that they would love to put something in your booty and you put down, I would never try that on yours. And you know that you're both looking at that, just take a minute, because we are fluid sexual human beings, and tell yourself, I am honored to be receiving this of my partners because they could be getting this anywhere else. And instead, I get to hold this information. And remember that the containers, again, what I was just saying before, this is a container. Be a safe container for your partner and ask them to be the same thing for you. And then again, come back to the few that you read that surprised you, that you want to try, and let it get really exciting for you. And then commit to revisiting the same list in a little bit, maybe in 2 months, because you'll have changed a little bit. You will. And maybe that one slightly adventurous thing you tried made you want to try something a little more adventurous. But those using tools that others have created are always my first step. And then like not reinventing the wheel at all. Go back to when you first learned about sex, the birds and the bees, the awkward conversations that you had. We carry with us that same first experience kind of all the time when we start to bring up new sexual things. It doesn't matter how old we are. It just doesn't. We still bring that like kind of scared, kind of nervous, kind of ashamed self with us. And then you add in sexual trauma of any kind, and it makes it that much more complicated. So please just have grace with yourself and have grace with your partner and pat yourselves on the back for being that brave. And then, yeah, like Brittany said earlier, like, please contact me. I'm able to do Zoom all over the world if you need someone to hold your hand through the process.
All right. That's so great, Lauren. Thank you so much for saying that. All these things. This is a great conversation. All right. To end our time, I just have these 10 rapid fire questions that are just for fun. So are you ready?
I am ready. And I saw on your thing you sent over, it was like rapid fire questions. They weren't there. And it was
you're like, whoa, they're rapid fire, Yeah. All right. So first one, which Disney princess would you want to take out to coffee?
Pocahontas.
Oh, nobody's mentioned her yet. She's a lot of fun. Yeah, I like her.
Yeah.
What's one thing you must have on your nightstand?
One of my Brazilian sex books. Yeah, I'm reading at any
You're like,
given
yes,
moment.
this is my life,
This
and
is
it's
my
on the
life.
nightstand. Yep.
Yeah, there's always a book with like this many sticky notes.
Yes. What's your go-to treat after your daughter goes to bed?
A glass of red wine.
Yes, that's nice. I feel like you could enjoy those treats so much more after the kids are in bed. You're like, I
Yes.
could drink this with dinner, or I could drink it after you
Or
go to
I can
bed.
enjoy this. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. What's an ordinary moment that brings you great joy?
Gosh, when I'm doing a puzzle and my people are around me in the house, like just doing their thing too, with soup simmering on the stove, me doing a puzzle, my daughter complaining about me doing a puzzle but doing something else, and my partner like doing house things or doing whatever. Yeah, just my
I love
people
that.
in my house. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great image. The last show you binged and loved.
Reacher. Loved it.
Nice.
Loved it.
I
Yeah.
haven't watched that one. I'll have to keep it
It's
in mind.
crazy. It's so crazy. But Trey and I had a date day and started it, I want to say like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Just watched it all the way through.
Oh,
It's
that's
so fun.
fun.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it when you find a show you like together and you just like, okay, let's watch another one.
Let's watch it.
another one.
Yeah. I mean, it was
love
our
that.
day. No one else needed us. We were like, let's just keep going.
Yeah, that's great. If you run out of this besides milk, you have to go to the store.
Coffee.
Who makes you laugh?
My partner, Trey, the very most, and then like my daughter, I guess. Yeah.
When you were 5 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up?
An actress. 100%. Storyteller.
And you have done that. That's great. I love that. And are you still acting?
You know, it's interesting. I haven't done a professional contract in a little while, but this morning I do morning pages every morning, and I wrote out, I need to remember that I'm a storyteller every single day, and I need to seize opportunities to still be my storytelling self. So no, I haven't acted in a professional production, but like I still act for myself.
Yes. Yeah. What are you looking forward to?
I get to be a panelist for a sexuality and faith conversation at the 1st of March. And I'm very excited about that. I think that religious institutions are still doing the most damage to individuals' sexuality. And so it's really a passion of mine to maintain those ties so that I can hopefully be a part of the healing that goes on there, as opposed to just giving it the middle finger, which I think is a lot of people's inclination, and I understand. So, yay, there she is.
Hi. Oh, did the iPad go off? Oh, it died? Okay. Do you want to play on my phone for a couple minutes?
Yes.
Do you want to say hi to Miss Lauren?
Yeah.
Hi. Hello.
All right. You can play on my phone and I'm almost done, okay?
Okay.
Okay, here you go. All right, go sit on the couch, please. That'll be fun. We'll have to integrate that somehow.
I want it in there, please.
All right.
Somebody brought a postpartum client brought their infant to sexuality and education the other day, and I got to hold a baby while doing sexuality education. I was like, it's like I am in heaven. I think this is what heaven is for me. This is
everything
where I belong.
love. Yeah.
Everybody just bring me babies and then let me talk about your sex.
Yes. All right, last one. Finish this sentence. Motherhood is
transformative.
All right, Lauren, if you would like to connect with Lauren, you can find her at sexedforyou.com and on Instagram and Facebook at sexedforyou. She has great information, and if you want to continue a conversation with her, I would encourage you to contact her on her website or through social media. Thanks, Lauren. This is such a great conversation, and I really hope it encourages and gives people a lot of good food for thought.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.
My daughter actually got up early from her nap, so I'm hoping we don't have any little visitors, but she's like, "Mommy, you in the closet. That's so silly."